Welcome to Hufu Adventures. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 virus. We're still in lockdown, maintaining social distancing, washing our hands, and every day on the news we hear more statistics of those who are infected by the virus, and sadly, those who are dying. But what we don't hear is any information about the origin of the COVID-19 virus. In today's episode, we'll hear part of an interview of Dr. Neal Barnard from the PCRM by Jane Unchained.
Jane Velez Mitchell with Jane Unchained here with Dr. Neal Barnard, the president of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. These are very trying times, and Dr. Neal Barnard has a call for the U.S. Surgeon General. Dr. Neal Barnard, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Jane. Thanks for all that you do to get the word out. Yes, the Physicians Committee this morning filed a petition with the U.S. Surgeon General. And here's the background. I don't need to tell you that people are dying from coronavirus. And we know where the COVID-19 originated. All evidence points to it starting in a live animal market in China. What many people don't realize is that these live animal markets have a lot of economic weight behind them. They're there for a reason, because people have been making a lot of money off of them. But they don't exist only in China. They also exist in the United States. What many people may not realize is that the Surgeon General of the United States actually has some legal authority that people may not be aware of. If there is an emerging epidemic coming into the population, the Surgeon General can take orders to shut down things like live markets. Hasn't been used very much. A number of years ago, salmonella was a huge problem. This is the bacteria that you associate with chicken. It can be, and the disease can be fatal. In this case, the Surgeon General discovered that it was being transported in turtles that were being shipped from place to place.
Wow.
As part of the pet trade, so to speak. The Surgeon General stepped in and said, "Stop that," and they did. So now you have live animal markets in New York State, in other states as well, and it is totally legal for them to stack up live animals that they either will then slaughter for you on the spot or give to you alive. That's a breeding ground for not only coronavirus variants, but other things, influenza variants and others. So what we have done is we've asked Jerome Adams, the U.S. Surgeon General, to use his legal authority to do two things. Number one, shut those down, not just in New York, but for the entire United States. And if people think that's a strong step, keep in mind that the failure to shut down one single market in China led to closing down every other business on the globe. So we've got to shut them down. The second thing that we're asking the Surgeon General to do, however, is to harmonize this step that the United States will take with other countries as well, because every other country has recognized what a threat this can be. And if we don't do this, it's just a powder keg that we are leaving aside. Here's my big concern. The current pandemic is going to wane. Sooner or later, it's going to wane. And people are going to come out of their houses. They're going to rejoice. The restaurants will be open. Everyone will say, "Isn't that great?" China is a few months ahead of us. They're already getting into that mode. There's going to be huge pressure to reopen their markets, and some reports have suggested they're already doing that. People in New York are going to say, "Wow, isn't it great that coronavirus is over?" And then they're going to be able to see, as you mentioned, 80 markets, more than 80 markets in New York that are a breeding ground for exactly the same problem.
Yes, and there's also a lot of discussion. I'm not an epidemiologist, but there are discussion amongst experts that there is no over, that it becomes dormant and that it can come up in a second wave. Can you address that?
Yes, a couple of things that can happen. The more likely scenario is that the virus itself will mutate. We see this with influenza viruses. The flu comes around every year. It's flu season. And the people making vaccines know that it's going to happen. And they know that the virus will mutate a little bit. It just changes a little bit from generation to generation. And they're trying to guess which flu virus is going to be the most prevalent one so that they can make a vaccine for it. They don't always guess perfectly, but that's the idea. What that means is the coronavirus. It's here. It's not going away. It wasn't here in early 2019, but it's here now. It's not going to go away. And it could also mutate, creating a new variant and a new variant and a new variant to which we have no prior resistance. Now, some of the reports say that its mutation rate is rather low. It's slower than influenza. If so, that's good news. But there's another thing that can happen. It's a process called reassortment. What that is you have the existing influenza virus, the one that's been going through the population, and then birds bring, and birds, by that I mean a duck arriving at a chicken farm. And so the duck passes the virus to the chickens pass the virus to the farmhands, they pass it to their community. This new virus combines, or mates, if you will, with the existing virus, and their progeny we have no immunity to at all.
Wow.
So the regular mutations are one thing. This reassortment process creates massive pandemics. We had the original one in 1918 with millions of deaths worldwide. We had another one in 1957, another one in 1968. We are set up for another one of these, and it's always the case where it comes from an animal population that serves as a breeding ground. If people did not keep animals for slaughter, for human consumption, those cauldrons that allow these viruses to breed and do the reassortment process would not exist.
This petition, which I am holding the news release in my hand, calls for the U.S. Surgeon General to shut down U.S. live markets to prevent future pandemics, and that this is a petition for rulemaking that you are filing. What's the process here for this to move forward?
We have sent it just today to Jerome Adams, the U.S. Surgeon General. Dr. Adams is a good doctor and a good man. I met him last year at the AMA meeting in Chicago. He's a very thoughtful person. Let me opine for just a second. He is part of a bigger structure. So I'm quite confident that if the decision were entirely his alone, that I think we would win this in about 5 seconds. Because he's part of a much larger structure that has other considerations that it's sometimes paying attention to, all bets are really off. What wins this kind of thing is public attention, the public demand. And I think we can be sympathetic to the people who operate these chicken markets or live animal markets or whatever. At the same time, they represent a menace to our public health. And we have no choice. We have to shut them down. So the more noise we make about that, the better. If you're watching this, please forward this to everybody you know. You can also ask them to make sure that their social networks are aware. Please write letters to the editor. Please write your comments. You can write to the White House. You can write directly to the Surgeon General. Please do make your voice heard. Our enemy on this is silence. That's going to be the big issue. There's another thing I need to tell you about, though, Jane, and that is this. When we look at people who get this disease, hand washing, social distancing, wearing masks, the whole strategy there is to stop people from contracting the virus. But once they've contracted the virus, who's going to live and who's going to die? We've learned very early on in this that people with underlying medical conditions are much more likely to have a bad course. They are about 6 times more likely to end up in the ICU compared to somebody who doesn't have one of these conditions, and they are much more likely to die compared to a person who does not have an underlying medical condition. What are they? Well, it's a respiratory virus, so asthma, smoking, lung diseases in general. It also attacks the heart, so high blood pressure or diabetes or other things that affect the health of the heart. These are all underlying conditions that make a bad outcome much worse. According to the CDC, 94% of people who have died from COVID-19 up until the end of March had one or more underlying conditions. Here's the problem. You turn on the TV and you watch the White House task force, and they will bring forward people who are, in many cases, real experts in infectious disease, for example. There is no one on the task force with expertise in underlying medical conditions. Nobody is talking about getting your diabetes under better control so that if you contract the virus, you won't die. There's nobody saying if you have high blood pressure, change your diet or adjust your medications so that you don't, if you contract the virus, you won't die. There's not even anybody saying to smokers, now is the time to quit smoking. Because if you're a smoker who contracts the virus, you're in much worse shape than a non-smoker who contracts the virus. Now,
what about eating meat and dairy? I mean,
yes.
If you're talking about healthy heart disease, which kills, according to the American Heart Association, about 1 out of every 4 Americans is caused by arteries to the heart getting clogged with plaque, which comes from cholesterol, which does not exist in plant-based products. It's only in animal products.
I think there's really 3 things that we need to do. The real obvious thing is if you're smoking or vaping, you got to quit. Within 6 weeks of quitting, the lungs are dramatically healthier. And we've got time. If you look at most models, there are plenty of people who do not have the virus now, but who will be getting it over the next month, 2 months, 3 months. Quitting smoking now is money in the bank. Step 2, let's say you're taking medications for diabetes or high blood pressure. Get on the phone now with your doctor and make sure your medications are current. If they've lapsed, if you no longer need them, get to the regimen that you do in fact need. But the third thing is exactly what you mentioned. Now is the time to change your diet. Why? Researchers have looked at, take high blood pressure. Years ago, researchers looked at the benefit of increasing vegetables and fruits and reducing or eliminating meat and animal products. And what they found, the study I'm thinking of is called the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, the DASH diet, sort of a semi-vegetarian diet. What they found is that blood pressure would drop within 2 weeks of making the diet change. What if you don't just reduce meat, but you eliminate it completely? You eliminate all animal products. Mm-hmm. Your blood pressure drops very, very rapidly. The point here is simply to say that if you've contracted the virus and you no longer have high blood pressure, your blood pressure is under better control, all the suggestions are that you're going to be more likely to do well. We talked about high blood pressure. The same is true with diabetes. A plant-based diet, in our NIH-funded research here at the Physicians Committee, a plant-based diet improves blood sugar control very rapidly. Within about 11 weeks, the A1C values that we track drop by about 1 full absolute percentage point, which is more than all the oral medications that we have will typically be able to accomplish. With regard to asthma, we do have a number of studies showing that when people avoid animal products, particularly dairy, when they get away from milk, cheese, yogurt, lung function improves in many of these studies. We have to make a decision now based on where we are and what we do know. And if a person watching this program has asthma, run, do not walk to a completely plant-based diet and throw out the dairy products completely. If you have a child who has asthma, in many cases, they improve on a completely plant-based diet. If you have one of these underlying conditions and you have not yet succumbed to the virus, now is the time to make these choices. It will not mean that you can't contract the virus.
Right.
You just like everybody, you've got to practice good social distancing, wash your hands, all that kind of stuff. But why allow this freight train to come into your life if you don't have to? If you've got an underlying condition, let's change our diet and so forth to see what we can do to improve.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more HUFU content. See you next time.